Hey,
Okay, okay, I think we're gonna start, and you've probably heard this before, but we need to pass notes from the last couple of meetings that we had, and also the agenda. I read the notes and a lot of good things. And questions or comments or additions.
One thing on the notes, Anne, Melissa pointed out that the meeting location is incorrect. So we will revise that before we post them and make them go official. So just we'll keep that in mind.
Which
When
one of the, which one?
both of the previous meeting notes say, I think, Severna Park Library, when in fact we were here. So we're just we're replacing the Severna Park with this address.
need a motion for it.
That's
Well, I think.
You know what, I did the other side, but I was we were at the library.
I'll make a motion to approve 621 and 626 meetings with the change of location. Correct location.
All right, any questions? Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I think that's it. Anybody against? Saying anyone? So then we go to the agenda. If you didn't bring it with you, we've got extra copies here if you want to look at it again. We have a lot to cover here. You know that. Do you have anything you want to question on this? Can somebody move the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Staying? Okay. Eric, do you want to?
Yeah, so real quick, let's start this off. First of all, this has been a very lengthy process for the SAC and us working together with you guys. So first and foremost, we really wanted to say thank you, and really be able to just kind of help show our appreciation tonight. So we were at the beginning here, we were gonna this is gonna be delayed a little bit, but for the SAC members from staff, we really want to say thank you for everything you guys have done. We know this has been a lot of your time. You guys have given up a lot of evenings, a lot of time to do the homework, to do the readings, to do all the material. So we really want to say we thank you. We have some snacks for you guys if you guys are feeling a little hungry. Between all this good conversation we're about to have tonight. So feel free to help yourself. But again, thank you, and we'll come back to you guys in a little bit to wrap this up too. So.
I think there are a lot of. Well, you know, your hard work. You know, everything. All that takes a lot of. Give my hand like. Can't give you
Yeah, so just to kind of for a recap of tonight's meeting, very broadly, and we'll go in bit by bit as we move forward. Tonight's meeting is to be the final SAC meeting. That's the goal of this Region 4 process. And part of this, we're going to discuss as everyone knows, we just recently had a public comment period open for the draft plan and draft map. So tonight we'll discuss all of that, as well as those comments provided potential new recommendations that we've sent to the SAC ahead of time through the SurveyMonkey that will be discussed tonight as well. Additionally, we want to do a refresher of the consistency changes, the purpose, Because there were a couple of consistency changes that were caught after the fact since we met earlier this year to discuss consistency changes, and that's also been shared with you ahead of time. I'll pass it to Jesse, and we can kind of do a quick recap about the consistency changes.
So when we first started talking about that was back in March and April of this year. I know it's a long time ago. We've been on vacation since then. And it feels like a while. So we're just gonna recap it briefly. So consistency changes are to make the zoning consistent with the Plan 2040 plan land use. So during the Plan 2040 process, they did a comprehensive analysis of the county, the development on the ground, the zoning, the plan land use. And they were trying to look to see what the plan land use should be and update it in certain areas. So the plan land use was adopted with Plan 2040. And so since then, staff have been looking at the zoning, the adopted zoning, to make sure that it is consistent with the adopted plan land use. That's a state requirement. So there have been a couple of aspects to this. So one is the zoning and parcel alignment. So I have a slide that'll show it in a second, but just to recap, our zoning map isn't snapped onto our parcel boundaries. And so sometimes that means that our zoning can wander a little bit. And so there are some areas where very clearly you can see a distinct shape of a parcel and you can see the distinct shape of the zoning, and they're not perfectly aligned. So we went through and we cleaned that up. And so you'll see some of those changes. And so this slide is a little outdated. We did take a bill to council to allow research and GIS to be able to make those changes. And so that slide is a little bit out of date, but no worries. So this is one example of our consistency changes. So this is a community over here, and we're currently looking at land use. This bright yellow is low density residential plan land use. This right here is low medium density residential plan land use. And actually this might be, sorry, this is the zoning, I apologize. The bright yellow is R2, this tannish color is R5, and this green color. And so you can see right here a good example of where the zoning boundary and the parcel boundary isn't aligned. These residential properties are split zones between R2 and R5. And you can see over here, in this one that it's half a little bit of R2 and a little bit of R5. And so when we looked at this area during Plan 2040, we cleaned it up and determined what areas should be low density residential plan land use, low medium density residential plan land use, and open space. And so that led to some proposed zoning changes to be consistent with those plan land uses. So staff recommended updating the zoning to R2 to be consistent with the low density residential plan land use designation. So it's been a while since I looked at the updated map, but I believe this parcel went to OS, and there were some other changes just to clean up this area. So here's another example. On this side, we've got the adopted zoning, and on this side, we've got the adopted plan land use, the recommended zone. And so you can see, just again, those areas where there's a little bit of split zoning. We've also got this issue, we've got some open space zoning on some residential properties. It's running along the back of those properties, kind of following probably like a creek or something. And so those properties have regulations in place to protect those environmental features that are there, regardless of the zoning. We're not gonna, there are regulations in place to protect whatever environmental features are there. And so it's not the OS zoning that carries the weight of the protection. It's there regardless of the zoning. And so to make it easier on the homeowner, and for other reasons, we just decided that through the plan land use, that it's easier to have a clear distinction of this is my residential property, these are the boundaries, it's all whatever the main zoning is. Because once again, those environmental features are protected through other regulations that are not the zoning. So you can see down here, we just cleaned it up. So these parcels are R1, these parcels are R2, and then we've got some open space parcels in the middle. Because we're not getting rid of the open space zoning, we're just wanting them to focus on, you know, platted floodplains, parks and open space areas, conservation areas, things like that.
So it's gonna be a repeat of 6 months ago.
I'm sure.
This is the exact slide.
Mhm.
This is an Arnold, correct?
I believe so.
I understand what you guys are attempting to do.
Mhm.
I think as a person of public who is not in your all's position, it is confusing to a homeowner to have restrictions. I realize they're there. I'm gonna use a shed. It's the same example I used last time. You got, the county council has increased the size of a shed to 150 square feet before you get permit. Right? It's a sizable 15 by 10 building. As a homeowner, if I was to see, not every homeowner is going to check the zoning map, I understand, but it's the easiest map to actually look at, determine what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. HOA person who's responsible for certain things, it's the easiest map for a volunteer to look at also. Oh, there's a green there. You should ask some questions. There's no green there. Don't ask any questions. I think you complicate it. It may make it easier for you all as professionals. I think you complicate it to the average resident to tell them that their plat is fully R5 and that all things apply, regardless of when you get to apply. I'd love to see a statistic of how many people actually apply to build their shed correctly, to do those sort of things, to put a walkway in a zone. And when you're doing it in a open space zoning, I think it's very dangerous. Best intentions there, especially with digital maps and GIS these days. I think you're going to create a huge headache down the road. That's just, I've had an issue with it. I understand it much better. I'm just putting it back on public record because I think it's going to be a challenge to argue with homeowners that buy this 10 years from now to say, there used to be OS, it's not showing on your map anymore. You can build a 150 square foot shed on the back of your property without a permit in what is technically a floodplain.
I got a follow-up question on that. So the environmental regulation and its applicability would depend upon somebody coming out and surveying from whatever that feature is, correct? To Bo's point,
For somebody to actually submit an application to apply and for OPZ, an environmental regulator, somebody to actually look at it and determine that those things are applicable.
because there's nowhere where that,
Pay grade, because I think the council already passed a lot of this stuff, or it's in the process of, but
because there's no overlay that's got a line that would show the environmentally sensitive areas that might be subject.
there are, if you apply and you can use GIS correctly as a non-professional and go and you click all your buttons and put a critical overlay and a 100-foot buffer and a 300-foot, 1,000-foot and an LDA and an RLAA.
Yeah.
If all of us could do that, we wouldn't have any of these discussions.
I wouldn't have a job.
And-
Half of my
But then, so I don't forget, and then on the last one, so the process for challenging what the zoning may permit and not permit happens somewhere other than the challenge as to whether or not an environmental regulation would apply. Like one, I would imagine would go through an administrative challenge and wind up in an Article 3, and the zoning would take a different path, right? Yeah. All right.
Mine only.
These parcels came to be. Was there a different policy in the last 20 years that encouraged small open spaces? I don't know the answer. But
Mine-
now we're trying to, at least if it's private land, we're trying not to use open space, correct?
Yeah, of course.
So on our existing zoning maps, you see the OS zone is demarked. In some cases, we could justify potentially, because if you're looking at other environmental layers, it seemed justified. But in other cases, developed land, buildings. Just didn't seem to follow any logic in certain cases. What we can best figure out.
There must have been another part.
Old ones, as I understand from previous conversations, is communities argued for, I want half this property as I want half this property as MA1. I know Cape St. Clair has a couple that are subject to change based on this rule. We don't necessarily agree with what Cape St. Clair had on, just to verify that. But as you know, a member of the county, I understand the simplicity and the accuracy that you guys are going for. I just think it will not result in the conversations that it's an unintended consequence.
So we are taking in consideration if there's communities or property owners that they want something split, but you know, it has to be
And we got
a geographic split that we can show on a map, because right now what we have, like our layers that you see that you use on GIS, they're not field checked, they're not surveyed.
Right.
So that's part of the problem. You're basing, you know, a development plan on something that's not field checked. And then I think it makes it a little more difficult to be flexible if there's additional, they go out and they survey the land and then there's more or less environmental features on that property. So it's
that the safety check for the residents to make sure it doesn't get out of hand. Making those things required.
Has OPC done an overlay of the green infrastructure map on top of all of these open space consistency? And the reason I ask, Michael Stringer gave a presentation not too long ago to the Citizen Environmental Commission, and he showed in colors, you know, those new parcels that have been acquired through the various funding sources in different colors. But he certainly didn't suggest through that map to show where these open space changes were that would be on that map to illustrate them in the same way, to color those in and say, essentially, these are protected pieces of property. But I just think that there should be that overlay on top of this to be able to really see what the changes are in open space.
so Plan 2040, plan land use map showing the conservation areas was used in the development of the green infrastructure.
Give us the stats at one point.
No, I understand that, but by specific parcel, by, you know, within the map itself, it shows that. I could go right now on the GIS and be able to see that with an overlay.
Yes.
Okay. And that overlay is available. Because I know that when Michael gave that presentation,
the green infrastructure.
green infrastructure plan, you could not, that particular overlay that he was showing with this acquisition and the colors, he said he was going to go back and make those changes, but you could not see that on the current GIS green infrastructure.
Maybe we can take this offline so I can make sure I know exactly what layers you're talking about, but and if they're publicly.
Any more questions? Oh, you haven't finished, Jessica. You want to go forward?
We got one more recap slide for you.
So this one, once again, might look familiar. This is the one that I really love to show, you know, just that the zoning's not snapped to the parcel boundaries. On this one, you can see our adopted zoning. This is Cypress Creek Park. It's got this very distinctive shape. And you can see here that there's a little bit of commercial in the park, and then a little bit of OS spilling into the road. And so, you know, I think we can all agree commercial right in front of the park is a park. And so over here, we've got recommended to have open space on all of the park with the commercial ending at the parcel boundaries. Yeah. Nice little, you know,
It seems like it's easier when it's a park, like a designated. Not private land. But when the private land, originally they wanted That's what that was my question. I guess everybody got, I don't know if you didn't get, the questions that I sent, Cindy gave us a very good answer. So we don't have to redo that. But my question was just, what was the purpose initially of open space, and are we losing something by doing this? Is it a matter of being convenient, or is it a matter of we have a policy about it? So
Originally, it was that 1978 floodplain map that delineated, but over time, the floodplain has changed. And so that's why a lot of what we saw didn't make sense anymore.
Yeah, so, yeah, before we continue, you can go next slide. But before we continue on, I want to go back a little bit and just continue our thank you. We have a guest of honor tonight. So,
Please, I'm actually here to observe. So, okay.
Come on, Chance. Let's go.
Okay. No, there's, I was not anticipating this. Hello, my name is Jansen Evelyn. I'm Deputy Chief Administrative Officer, the Office of the County Executive. I just wanted to say on behalf of the County Executive, on behalf of the administration, thank you so much for the amount of time, energy, effort you put into this. You're one of the first of 3 batches of SACs that came out, and I've also been told that other than a few changes at the very beginning, there have been no changes to this group. You guys have come in, rolled up your sleeve, and just went to work. And you've been dealing with just this first one, the whole open space discussion. That's something I've been watching from afar. And so it's a big issue. So you guys are addressing tough issues and making decisions. And I just want to say on behalf of the county executive, I'm very grateful for all of your work, all of your time, and also you were the guinea pigs in many ways. Since, I mean, you were. Oh, I'm sorry. That's not a word. You were the trailblazer, and as a result, the staff, OPZ staff, county administration, we've learned some lessons from watching the first 3 sets of SACs go forward. But I cannot undersell the importance of the work. As a result, there are citations, and staff will pass it out to you after you're done. I anticipate you'll go and get this professionally framed and hung up in your office. But ultimately, the citations read, the residents of Anne Arundel County, Maryland salute, insert your name, in recognition of your commitment to Anne Arundel County's Region 4 Stakeholder Advisory Committee planning process. And you've selfishly volunteered your time and expertise to create a vision for a healthy, livable, and vibrant community. You've also provided steady leadership in managing this committee. We commend you for your excellent work and extend to you our most heartfelt appreciation. And we extend on behalf of the county exec, we extend our best wishes in all of your future endeavors. And of course, he ends the citation with thank you for making Anne Arundel County the best place. Yes. So again, thank you for your time. And if I'm around by the end of the meeting, I want to find out who your artist is, because I'm going to get a half sleeve in the near future. That's part of my midlife crisis. So I look forward to that. It is. It's part of my midlife blessing. So anyway, thank you and continue to extend.
Okay. So as we mentioned earlier, we just finished the open comment period for the draft plan. And while we had open comment, we received a lot of comments from the public as well as from you guys as the SAC. So from the public standpoint, we received a couple big buckets of information, right? The first one was the plan in general, right? So initially we heard a lot, and we sent you all a summary of comments that we've heard that's available to you. It's available on our hub site for anybody from the public to be able to look at as well. But just to kind of recap that, essentially what we heard from the preliminary draft, there was a lot of support for mixed use zoning in certain situations, such as utilizing it along the B&A trail at locations where the trail gets close to commercial areas. There's also mentioning of, that neighborhood consistency and compatibility that we talked about for a couple different meetings, such as like the Riviera Beach area, the Mountain Road area, that kind of stuff, where it doesn't necessarily make sense to go to 150 feet. So it was implied that to continue to do that review and make sure that there's a better neighborhood type of mixed use in the future. Transportation comments, shocker, traffic was obviously a question, point. There were some comments for new infrastructure, such as, just continuation of bicycle infrastructure. There was actually a comment talking about connection of the metro. And again, just making the village centers more transit kind of friendly from a multimodal standpoint. Other comments were including basically protecting the green space, referencing minority communities in the region, encouraging affordable housing, providing financial incentives for septic and sewer, and stuff we've kind of heard throughout the entire process, right? So with that, from those comments in the plan, as well as the comments we'll talk about from the SAC, we'll kind of discuss how these comments have been implemented, right? And there will be a new draft plan before we get to the PAB, the Planning Advisory Board, where all can view and take a look, and everyone can provide testimony and comment at the PAB as well. So moving on to the OS zoning, that was another big item that was discussed a lot through phone calls, emails, and comments on the tool or map. The most of them actually came from one property called from 580 Lakeshore Drive, the Groucher Club. This was a consistency change that staff saw and was recommended and was initially recommended to become a residential zone. But as you guys have seen in the new SurveyMonkey link we sent out, we have recommended to keep it open space. I think there were over 100 comments from the community. Yeah, from the community, it's saying, hey, we want to keep it open space. So we staff recommendation was to listen to that community and let them recommend open space for the future. A lot of other things related to OS zoning was just general questions and understanding why is the change, right? So we had a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, just people wanting to know why this change was occurring. So we kind of laid out the process that Jesse just described a few minutes ago, and that Cindy also helped answer to help provide that information. So the maritime zoning, as mentioned before, there was a good amount of comments talking about the neighborhood type of marina, where MA1 may not fit certain areas, but MA2 is the most applicable, even though that the community may see the MA2 being too much for their community, such as we talked about the PYY marina. There was a lot of support for the PYY showing for MA2, which is what's recommended from staff and the SAC. The 2116 Bayfront Terrace was another area that showed a lot of support for the MA2, which was a recommendation from the staff and SAC. And then there's also a lot of comments from the Orchard Beach community that there's an application down there for one property wanted to become MA2. And this was also the SurveyMonkey that you guys looked at as well. But a lot of the properties we staff looked at and saw that there were a lot of non-conforming marinas. So we recommended to make them all MA2 to be conforming, but the community actually decided they didn't want that. So we've listened to them and provided a recommendation to keep the residential zoning, other than the one applicant who wanted the MA2 there. And then we go down to the zoning new recommendations. There were a list, I think, of 11 that you guys have been able to review. We'll discuss that here in a minute, and we'll kind of walk through that. And then finally, there were a few other comments, but those were not really related to the plan. They talked about how any potential difficulties with the web tools, or maybe the meetings weren't recorded properly, or like because there were issues with the audio, stuff to that nature. So not really related to the plan or zoning, but still part of that comment period. So what we've heard from you all is there were a lot of good comments we've heard from you guys. So a lot of things we've heard was there were a lot of minor text revisions, and there's one we can see on the screen that was initially written as quality parks and good schools, and the recommendation was to just put quality parks in schools. So that's one example of the handful to kind of just make the text a little more accurate and more, I guess, grammatically correct. There were a couple of comments on map revisions, the quality of maps, and there was one map that showed I think post office in Riviera Beach. So we revised that to reflect the accurate data. So we're working to make sure the quality of the maps are as the highest standard for the PAB draft and the county council draft. One other good comment we received was how do the strategies that the SAC deliberated on and discussed actually connect to issues. So one comment we heard was connected to the equity, right? So what staff is doing is we're adding a section of the plan where we show the importance of equity and show what a few strategies, not all, of what strategies can actually help achieve equity in this plan. And then as well as what we heard. So there's a bunch of different issues that we've heard. And I have a graphic on the next page. I'll show you exactly what's going to go into the plan, or at least a version of it, to kind of show 4 big items of different topics from natural environment, built environment, economy, and community to and recommendations of what this plan is doing to help achieve those goals. Another big item was COVID. Obviously, hopefully we're moving away from it, but a lot of the data, a lot of the studies have been impacted directly by COVID, right? So we don't know what the data now is going to be for the next 10 years based on the COVID's impacts. So we're going to add some words and paragraphs to note that, because just to make sure that we are aware COVID happened and we are aware COVID has impacts. We're just not necessarily quite sure what the impacts of COVID actually are for the long term. And then finally, we also heard a lot about trying to get more very very specific data, right? And connecting it to the plan. And some issues that we had was we worked with our GIS department and we worked with other agencies to really get as specific data as possible. But the problem is sometimes data just doesn't exist more than a census block or census tract. So we're always on the lookout for the more accurate and more perfect data, right? And we know no data set's really perfect, but we're always on that hunt to do so. And also the small area plan comparison. Which one thing that was brought up to us was just talk a little bit about the small area plans and the population back then and how have we grown since then. We're going to add that in the growth comparison, but it's hard to be very specific because the small area plan boundaries are a little different than the region plan boundaries. So we're going to add some data, we're going to add some points and some words to that, but it's not perfect. So we just want that to be noted and to share that with you all. So the next slide kind of shows the one example of what we heard. The top portion, I know it's kind of blurry, but the top portion are the 4 big bullet points, right? One for each of the chapters of the plan. And so like the natural environment talks about, protection of of spaces. The built environment talks more about affordable housing and diverse housing options. So, and then the bottom portion is what's this plan doing to help recommend the resolution for these issues, or how can we move forward to better that? And we're kind of just doing a couple bullet points showing that we understand the concept, and here overall is a taste of what we're doing in the plan to help address that. And obviously there's a long list of strategies in the appendix that we'll reference and go to, but this is just kind of generally speaking what we've heard from the comment period and how we're working to address these changes. are there any questions, any other comments you might would like to share before we move on?
Eric, first of all, staff did a great job, not only putting together this region plan, but the other two region plans as well. I don't know if any other regions had a chance to see the draft plan before it was sent out and have a chance to talk about it in a meeting like this. We did not, but as you talked about already, that we're kind of guinea pigs. But for the comments that were provided by this group, it would certainly be nice to be able to know on that spreadsheet, either it was adopted but modified or rejected.
Sure.
So that we don't have to go fishing through the next plan.
And we as staff or we have a list of where our changes are occurring, and we're still working on that draft, right? Like when we get done tonight, we're gonna go tomorrow and work to finalize that draft for the PAB because we're on a tight timeline. So we would have loved to share that new draft with you today, but we don't have it yet. So when we do, we absolutely will, and we'll make sure everybody's well aware of it, and we'll be able to kind of show where changes have been tracked or made.
And then for the next group, just setting expectations. We didn't have a chance to look at any section of that plan as we moved along through the different phases. And you made it clear that we're just advisors, that you're doing the grunt work and putting it all together. And I don't think anybody here wants to write the plan. But as you go forward with these next groups, you ought to make it clear to them, here's what the final product looks like, and here's how you'll be involved with it.
Sure.
There's no surprises there.
Absolutely. And that's one thing we've heard, and we have a lessons learned slide that we'll talk about at the end after we get through zoning. But you're absolutely correct. And one thing, even though we never showed you a piece of the plan, we have, like the recommendation section of the plan, we discussed it, January 9th, 23rd, February 13th, February 27th, May 22nd, right? Even though it wasn't pretty and wasn't in like this, we did our best to kind of break it down and show you ahead of time what it may not look like this in the final plan, but this is going in the final plan. So anything else? Okay. So and then the only other addition to the plan is we discussed this back in April. April 3rd and April 10th. So these are just overlays that we were talking about. And the first one is up north. It borders region 3 and 4. If you guys remember, this was a commercial revitalization area that's not in the targeted growth area. But in order to have the benefits of the targeted growth, such as essentially grant opportunities and stuff like that, we discussed and created this new corridor revitalization and redevelopment overlay, just so this area can have the same opportunities as others. That so again, this was discussed and mentioned, and I believe voted on by the SAC as a recommendation on April 3rd. And then on April 10th, we discussed the mixed use overlay zone for the Severna Park Marketplace. The land use for the Severna Park Marketplace area has been mixed use since 2009. So the same kind of concept here. We're just making this a mixed use overlay zone to help make sure everybody has that opportunity in front of them moving forward. And the only reason we're bringing it up tonight is because this has not been added to the DPA, this has not been added to the Development Policy Area Plan map yet. So we just wanted to, again, make sure we're being as transparent as possible and showing you exactly what we're going to be adding to the DPA map when it gets into the final plan. And what you're reading there is pretty much the definitions and text that will be inserted into that plan, into the plan.
Final plan has no specific approval by the SAC.
Correct. We are just staff as well. We're just providing recommendations. Sure. The only people that have final approval is the council. Any questions or good to move on?
Sounds like we can move on.
So zoning, the new zoning applications and recommendations. So these were all sent to you. Survey Monkey about 2 weeks ago, maybe about a little longer, a little shorter, 2 weeks ago. For the first portion, we had 14 out of 15 SAC members complete it. So thank you all. On the second portion, we got to consistency, 13 out of 15. So again, great response rate. We were able to that really helps staff and this meeting go so much smoother. So we really appreciate that. So if you look at this slide, these are the 11 applications that came in. The first one is a revision of one of the applications you guys have already seen. It's that 1212 Ritchie Highway, right across the street from the Y and the community college. So if you look, all the green had a consensus of at least 2/3 of the SAC who voted or who filled out the Survey Monkey, excuse me, agreed with staff's recommendation. The only one that did not is 1737 Poplar Ridge Road. So what I would recommend, and if there's a member of the committee who wants to pull one out to discuss, that's perfect, that's great. But what I would recommend is what we did at the last meeting. There was a motion to kind of group all the ones that already had consensus together and vote on it, and then discuss the 1737 by itself. But that's totally up to the SAC.
Is there a way to put your recommendation up with those?
So each slide, this is, for example, this is 1212, or sorry, this is 12. Each slide, if we want to go to each slide, we can see a breakdown of the SAC and how you all responded to the survey.
Could we look through all of this before we?
Yeah, so, but yeah, absolutely. But one thing, just keep in mind, all the green do already have that at least 2/3 consensus. So, but we can absolutely go through if that's what you guys want to do.
For transparency, I think you should go
Okay.
at least through them. You may not have to have, lengthy discussion, but at least have them up on the screen.
So
Since they're new.
So the first one is the 1212 Ritchie Highway. We've discussed this one as a group a couple of times, just because they had a land use change application during the Plan 2040 process. It was deferred to the region plan, so we discussed it a while ago this spring. They then filed a comp zoning application, a comprehensive zoning application. And so we discussed it then. At that time, they were requesting C4. And so the SAC discussed it. And, we discussed it in length, or not in length, we discussed it. And one of the things that I recall us talking about, and when I reviewed the notes, is that when we were discussing the current development is a veterinary clinic, hospital, what have you. And they have a special exception to operate in the R1 zoning district, which is the adopted zoning. And when we discussed when you guys as a group discussed the application for C4, you said that you recognize that that's typically needs C4, but since they had the special exception, and given the location that it's at, C4 might not be the best for their surrounding neighborhood if the vet were ever to leave. So at that time this spring, y'all were still rolling with let's recommend. They received a letter letting them know what staff recommended and what the SAC recommended, which was one, and they said, what about C3? So we sent this to you in the Survey Monkey. So you can see here in this table, just a little breakdown of some of what's going on. So you can see the acreage, the adopted zoning, the most recent draft that's been out for public review, what the recommended plan land use was, the most recent draft that was out for public review, what the zoning was, the applicant requested zoning, and at this time, what OPZ's recommendation is. This paragraph is just a little summary of what I just discussed with you guys. Here it is on a map, and here's what the survey month was. Comments, thoughts, questions, or do you guys want to see the next one? So once just for transparency, when we sent you the Survey Monkey, the specific question was, do you agree with the OPZ's recommendation of R1? And so you can see that 71.43% said yes, no discussion, and then an additional 7.14 said if there's time. So thoughts, comments, questions, or next one? So this one is 1257 and 1273 Ritchie Highway in Arnold. So this was a new application. The adopted,
Jess, can you give us a little orientation? Like,
Oh, yeah.
when you said it was the veterinary clinic, then I figured out which one we were talking about.
yep,
Okay,
so this blue is the
got it.
community.
This is across from,
college.
okay, thank you.
This, yeah, okay, then you got it.
Thank- Got it.
So once again, we've got our acreage, you can see our adopted zoning. Our most recent, plan that was out for public review, what the plan land use was, what the most recent recommended zoning was, their request, and OPZ's recommendation. So this is a little image of it. The request, they sent us a map. And so it was kind of like two big chunks of C4 fronting Ritchie Highway and R5 on the back. And so when OPZ reviewed this one, given the location, directly adjacent to the community college, it could be, a good location for some additional housing. So we recommended the R5 that you see here. So when we sent it out in the Survey Monkey, we asked, if you agreed with staff's recommendation of R5, and here you can see the breakdowns. So comments, thoughts, questions, or?
Next slide. And this is very helpful.
Now we're at 1254 Ritchie Highway. That's this one right here in red with the blue X.
And that's a Providence Center.
Yep. So just for orientation's sake, the blue is the community college. Right here is the driving range. Yeah. And then, so that's where we're at. The Providence Center, acreage, adopted zoning, most recent plan land use and zoning recommendations. And they requested W2. When staff reviewed this application, we recommended W2. And then you can see the breakdowns of when we asked that question to the SAC, if you agree with staff's recommendation. So
W2 is industrial zoning.
that's correct. So you can see on this map, the purple, the plan land use is the layer that's on. And so you can see that there's already some industrial, plan land use in the area. I couldn't tell you what these businesses are, but I could pull it up on a map if you wanted to know any other information.
The Providence Center came asking us upgrade or upzoning. It was purely because if it's W2, they would be able to sell it for more. I'm just telling you, that was what we learned last time. And I like the building there. I just.
Other thoughts, comments, questions from the SAC? Ready to talk about the next one? All right. We had one come in for 1360 and 1355 Ritchie Highway. Bear with me, I can't see on this one. This one's 1355, it stretches all the way up there, and this one is 1360. I believe one of them, someone pointed out to me, was a garden center. And that's the B&A trail, that light blue. I don't know if that helps you at all. I'm really sorry, guys. But here's our table with our breakdowns. They were requesting small business zoning. Just as a refresher, small business zoning doesn't necessarily mean, you know, mom and pop. It's more so a designation for businesses that are in buildings that kind of look like residences, is my general, really brief understanding of it. But it could be, you know, anything that fits into that, the regulations within the zoning code. So just for clarity's sake, like a Dunkin' Donuts that follows the regulations in the zoning code could be zoned small business. So when these folks requested small business and we took a look at their development, they're already built out in a way that doesn't necessarily follow the intentions or some of the regulations of small business zoning. So we recommended maintaining the adopted R1 on this side of Ritchie Highway and R5 on this side. So you can see the breakdowns of if the SAC agreed with that recommendation.
The presentation will be posted online sometime tomorrow.
I just wanted to make, I was one of the no's.
No.
No, but once we discuss, if you're like an applicant, we'll send you a letter if that's what you're worried about.
I was one of the no's, and I won't stand in the way of this decision because it's not huge. I just said no for the same reason that I was agreeing with the request from what was Cafe Breton, but is now a beer garden. Is that it's, since I've lived here, which is always, it's always been a garden center as far as back of my memory, and just for that historical, like, and honoring of the heritage that of what they brought to the community. That's why I said no. But again, especially since you said it doesn't fit with regulations, I'm not going to stand in the way of it.
I also, the smaller, property on the other side of Ritchie Highway, to me, that looks like an office building. Doesn't look like a house. And that whole stretch of Ritchie Highway, I mean, I think it's interesting that there are all these Ritchie Highway things. There's a lot of what look like single family homes that are now have signs out in front and there's businesses there. How many people want to live in a single family home on Ritchie Highway because it's being turned into a house? I question all of these being R1s. Just because of what Ritchie Highway is, and it's getting even worse, I think. I think I know that location really well. It does look like an office building. They built it as their house. There were some complaints along the years and years and years, but that's what they built it as a house, even though it's used as well. What are you gonna do?
Echo just a comment, Melissa's comment that the R1 along Ritchie Highway is kind of strange. And I wouldn't be surprised if 10 years from now we look at it and it's not going to be looking for something else.
People are talking about, I mean, I think Dick Ladd used to say, when you knew him, Ritchie Highway is going to become all commercial. And a lot of us who live in Arnold and Sparta Park wanted to try to make it not all commercial. We were talking to staff about the nodes where where you see this traffic light that's better for commercial, but leaves some of the homes and places there. So that's kind of what I think Arnold Preservation Council and others have been trying to do. So this one was a sore point with us, but we kind of got over it. I don't know if what the current in R1, R5.
Yeah, it's currently R1 and R5, and that's what the staff recommendation. The staff recommendation is to keep what the current adopted zoning is.
The lighter, more opaque white shade, that's the R1, and this tannish orangey color is the R. Any other thoughts, comments, questions? I know some people were suggesting that some other stuff's any motions. I just don't want to rush this.
So the next one I want to, oh, never mind, go ahead, sorry.
So the next one is 1656 Pleasant Plains Road. If it looks a little bit familiar to you, we had one that we've discussed during like the earlier round of applications. I think it was this property, to be exact. And so it's the same case for both of them. Right now we're looking at the planned land use on the map. The planned land use is rural, so the consistent zoning would either be RA or RLD. In this case, both of these properties, including the one that we're talking about right now with the blue X, have RA zoning, and they were requesting RLD zoning. Some things to think about. So the DPA in this area, the development policy area, I believe is Peninsula. So it's it's a limited growth area given the location and the resources down there. And also these properties are within the resource conservation area, critical area designation. And so what that means is that, if you're in the RCA, and I can pull up that layer if you'd like. If you're in the RCA, it has a development capability of 1 unit per 20 acres. So for most of the property, it wouldn't be developable beyond what it is anyways. And so it's not really possible to meet the applicant's wishes that they described. So that's why we recommended maintaining the RA zoning. Okay. Next up is 8150 Waterford Road in Pasadena. So the location is marked with this blue X. We've got Mountain Road and 648 right here, so that's where the intersection we're at. And so this applicant requested C1 zoning. You can see the red here is commercial plan land use, so there is some commercial in the area. And so you can see our table we've got across the top, and staff recommended C1 zoning. And here we've got the breakdowns of how the SAC thought about it when they reviewed it.
I think that's the corner where Arundel Seafood is.
I didn't hear what you said.
It's the corner where Arundel Seafood is.
Rama Seafood is Solly Road.
Yeah, Solly
And Mountain, right?
But it's, yeah, but it's across this, that's what I'm saying.
No, I thought you said 648.
Oh, yeah, I apologize. I could be incorrect. We've got 8103 Hogneck Road in Pasadena. So these two are marked with the blue X's again. So Hogneck Road is running right here. And so this one, I believe, where my cursor is currently, is already some kind of restaurant situation. And the one next door, I believe, is a parking lot. The restaurant has currently adopted a C1 zoning, or like a combination of C1 and R2. And they both got the commercial plan land use, that's the red you can see. But they requested C3 zoning, as you can see up here. But it's located within a fairly residential neighborhood. This opaque white color is the low density residential, so that would be R1 or R2 zoning. The tan color up here is low medium density residential, which is R5 zoning. And this orangey color, I believe, is medium density residential, which is R10. So just given the location that it's primarily residential around here, and that they've already got the C1 zoning primarily, we recommended C1 zoning. And this is how the SAC voted. This is the one you'll recall from our very first slide, and the breakdowns right here. This is the one that we really should talk about tonight. So we're at 1737 Poplar Ridge Road in Pasadena. So the blue is maritime, and the white is that low density residential. So the consistent zoning would either be R1 or R2. And so the folks who own 1737 requested MB. I can pull up a zoning map if we want to look at that more closely during our discussion. But I believe this one right here with the maritime plan land use is MB zoning. This property is in the Peninsula Development Policy area. And so it's not recommended to have a lot of new growth. And also the 1737 is almost entirely within the resource conservation area, critical area. So if you guys, obviously the group is a little bit split. So if anybody wants to discuss, open up discussions. If you want me to pull up geocortex, we can look at some layers. Is there anything anybody wants to see or say to get us going?
Can I make one comment, Jesse? You said it is in the critical area RCA.
I believe so, yes.
So that also means for this property that if it were to go into that maritime California, it would need growth allocation to upgrade their critical area designation. So it would definitely be a mismatch between the zoning and the critical area. You know, if this one gets changed, there would have to be additional approvals for this property.
Just gonna stop the share on this one.
Similar. Just the property next to it.
I don't know what process the neighboring property went through to get what it had. It could have been in existence prior to critical area. If it was, then it would have automatically gotten a higher level critical area designation.
Anybody that wants to say more about the one we just looked at? Otherwise, we got the next slide.
That's
Oh,
the one we
sorry.
have to discuss.
Yeah.
There was no consensus on.
Oh,
We can.
But we can keep going,
And
yeah.
then come back.
I was just gonna pull critical area right real quick, yeah. And then we can go back to it. All right, so that dark green color, that's our resource conservation area, critical area. So that's the area that is the one for like housing development. The yellow is the limited development area, critical area. That one I believe allows 4 units per acre.
Generally, at least 4 units per acre.
So you can see the one we're talking about now, 1737, split up here, primarily that RCA, the less intense development. And then you can see how the MB is next door in the LDA. So any thoughts, comments, questions for, or do you want us to talk about the next one? We'll come back. Okay. All right, this one is 8020 Ritchie Highway in Pasadena. So we're up at the northern end of Region 4. The property is identified with the blue X. So this one, I believe, is the lawnmower repair business. And so the lawnmower repair business, I believe, has a non-conforming use or something that allows them to be there with the zoning that they've got. They wanted C4. And so when we reviewed it, you know, this opaque white color is low density residential plan land use. That means it's on. So, you know, it does abut some commercial, that's the red, but it is the entrance to this neighborhood. And so staff recommended R2 zoning, which is probably maintaining the adoption. And here you can see the breakdowns of what you saw earlier.
I'll just throw this out. I mean, this talking about historic property. This property has been a lawnmower repair shop forever. I mean, at least 20 years plus. And
it continued that way.
it could continue that way. I also just feel like it's in a sea of commercial, but I mean, we're not getting, I don't know, I'm just. Yeah, no, it's not Jack's. No, it's the Toro dealer. I guess I was the only one. Pretty quiet now.
No, but I mean, that's why we're bringing this up. That's
That's
why.
Okay. Next we got 8025 Elvaton Drive in Pasadena. So this is Route 2 right here. I believe we're still in northern Region 4. And I'm not quite, the crossroad is Elvaton, that's for sure.
For sure.
Yeah. So we got our stats up there. This one, the application, it is a residence, but the owners also operate their business out of this location. And so because of that, they were requesting C4 zoning to accommodate their business. The red is commercial. The opaque white, as we've been discussing, is that low density residential. So staff recommended maintaining R1. And then you can see the breakdowns. Thoughts, comments, questions?
What businesses?
Um,
Trying to look up this.
I think it's a driveway repair business.
They do, yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
That's absolutely correct.
302 Ritchie Highway in Savannah Park. If this one looks kind of familiar, we had one that we discussed earlier in this area. I think it was this one where my cursor is. They had requested, I think C1 zone or C something zoning, but their planned land use was small business. That's what we're looking at right now. That's what this pink color means, is small business planned land use. So when we discussed this one where my cursor is earlier, staff recommended small business zoning to go to match that small business plan land use. And we also recommended these two properties in between, would have small business plan land use and small business zoning, because this one had small business plan land use and recommended small business zoning. This property owner, the one where my cursor is now, requested C3 or C4. But we're after reviewing, maintaining, small business zoning would be best here.
If anybody knows, it's the insurance company, it's a lovely house. So I wouldn't like to see C4.
The one where we got creative, change like the entire area.
I think that's higher, further.
Use nice words.
As a child driving by there.
I think this might be our last one. Yep. So, remember, we got to talk about that 1737 because we didn't get consensus. But were there any others that stood out to people where you want to go back and talk about them?
No, but I have a clarification to make sure I fully understand. If you have a small business operating as non-conforming, and does it become conforming? In other words, people sell the business, or if the business shuts down, how do you determine if it shuts down?
Is this non-conforming?
Just general for all.
So what I'm hearing your question is, if I am running a business out of a structure that it looks like a house, for
And you're in a RS.
yeah, and I'm in a residential neighborhood.
Right.
What do I have to do to become conforming to get that zoning that matches?
Well, if someone is running the business now, they happen to die.
Okay.
And then the business goes to somebody else. If the business continues, that's still non-conforming, but if the person changes in nature.
If they have okay.
So we have a non-conforming use status in the county that you have to apply for and actually get designated. So we kind of throw the term around loosely because the use could be existing, but it is non-conforming, but they didn't actually apply for non-conforming status. So some of it depends on whether or not they have the official non-conforming status. And the thing is, it's a slippery slope because some of these houses, which people have said, I wouldn't want to live on Ritchie Highway. Yeah, a lot of people have decided that, and they've put small businesses in those uses. They are non-conforming with zoning, but they may not be official non-conforming uses on the county list. So in the case of a business transferring, it would probably need to have the official non-conforming use from the county. Otherwise, it's still going to be just, it's. Well, the thing is, unfortunately, I think in this county, you do have uses out there that are not conforming with the zoning, and they're just kind of continuing.
And there's also a lot of businesses that conform with the zoning of residential needed. Planners, tax accountants.
And actually, I think small engine repair might be included in a business you can operate out of your house.
Like certain zones with certain things, and as long as you have no more than one non-family member.
And like saw sharpening and stuff like that. Yeah.
You can do a metal shop, if you and your family, but you only have one non-employee.
Okay.
Just like a construction company. A road, like paving company. Technically, it's all family members.
Family.
Not conforming to the ones that aren't committed that you then get an excuse for it.
I was wondering if any taking away the person's right to sell.
Oh, sure.
think in a lot of cases, like a non-conforming use is difficult from a financing perspective. Like a bank would not look at someone who has a non-conforming use the same they would look at someone who actually conforms. So in the case of like that lawnmower repair shop, which is also a dealer, I believe selling the equipment is not being used in a residential zone. They may have a difficulty in selling their business to someone if they had to finance it. The person who's going to buy it,
They
the buyer was-
apply for, I don't know.
No, yeah, but you could, but it's more difficult for the buyer to obtain
No, I
financing.
think before they sell it. So,
Right, so who knows, that lawnmower repair shop may be thinking about selling. I'm just throwing it out there. That's.
Yeah, again, I was trying to
Difficulty,
understand, see if we're
yeah.
taking away someone's great. Someone business, they die and do their heirs get anything? Have a piece of property, it's now residential instead of commercial.
well, if they had commercial before.
Well, they have an exception.
Well, this one has an exception.
No,
it's
I'm
not-
Okay.
talking in general, because we have a dozen. Center, whatever. Does that affect any of these decisions we've already made?
Staff can, in part of our analysis, we researched if they had a certified non-conforming use or special exception or something of that nature to come up with our recommendation.
Okay, so the businesses that we're talking about in these sections here can continue on.
My understanding is if they have a certified non-conforming use, which is something I talked to zoning about, then they can continue, like if they sell, it can continue to be whatever it is, as long as like it turns over within a year.
Yeah. There's a time frame where if someone were to pass away, but the business is still wanted to be operated. I don't know the time off the top of my head, but there is those safety
Okay, that's
nets.
good to hear.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah. So
18-4106, whether each business, each type of zoning, permitted, conditional, and special exception.
Okay, but you believe that all these businesses, the simple question is, can these businesses continue? Somehow.
as long as they have the non-conforming, yes. To my understanding, yes. A certified non-conforming use.
I think that's not a question.
Just a question. For authorized non-conforming use, you used to send out a once a year questionnaire letter, and that would have to be sent back in. But I haven't seen those letters. So did the letter stop coming out for the non-conforming property?
So, Gus, that is handled by the zoning division, and everybody here tonight is from the planning division. We can't answer that question, but we can talk to our compadres in zoning and find that out, because I hear what you're saying. It's a way of tracking. And if we're not doing it, and I don't know, but we can find out.
Are we ready to talk about this?
Yeah, so yeah.
So, I don't know whether or not we're gonna have to do another, vote with everybody here, but, I would change my vote. I paused on this. We looked at a lot of maritime, rezoning requests. That initially, when I saw this, I thought that we had made some exceptions, out there, and I didn't have the opportunity to go back and review those ones out there as an example. But Jessica, your arguments and everything are very consistent. One thing that I think has stood out in this process, if we looked at 79 different changes before these,
Oh, yeah.
was that the staff's recommendations were well thought out. They were consistent. Even though we had a couple of speed bumps in there, I don't think this is one of those. And so I would change my vote.
Which way to go?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You didn't know that I was one of those.
Were you green or blue?
I was on.
I think we would have to take a vote of who's here no matter what.
If it helps, will also change my vote because, just information I learned here tonight has swayed him, so.
When we take a new vote.
Okay. Somebody make a motion about this interchange or not change?
I move to accept OPZ's recommendation of R2 for this property.
Is there a second? I'll second. All in favor, or if you want further discussion, it seems like we've done it. If you want to vote now, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. So everybody seems to change. And
Were there any abstentions?
Now we have, for the other ones, is there a motion to vote on them all together, or is there any other ones that we want to be called out?
There's gonna be an opportunity for non-SAC members to participate in this case.
well, we normally do that, and we hadn't talked about it because we have such a long agenda, but I think we do need to either do it now or do it at the end of the meeting.
If you have people, you've got people in the room who haven't been at meetings before and they're probably here for zoning requests, I would do it now.
Well, who wants to go first? Does everybody know this gentleman?
Good afternoon. My name is Phil Hager. I've been asked to represent the property under 302 Ritchie Highway. And staff, if you possibly turn back to that one a couple slides ago. First of all, thank you for this opportunity to address this. Madam Chair, thank you for your kindness in allowing me to speak. And I want to salute staff and the SAC for the incredible work that they've done to this point, getting this document where it is. We've been truly pioneers and a lot of things happen. You had to blaze a new trail, and I know what that's like. And an awful lot of credit needs to go to the folks, particularly those who have led this particular process. So thank you for all of that. With deference to your decision with regards to this particular property, I'd like to respectfully ask that you reconsider this and at least look at this property for a designation of C1. Look at the size of this property. It's one of the few properties that doesn't already have a shopping center on it along the entire area of Ritchie Highway, not only in this region, but in the entire area of Route 2 from 50 to the county line. That is of this particular size. Keep in mind also that the State Department of Assessments and Taxation has determined that this property is utilized in a commercial manner, and they are fully assessing this property owner at a commercial rate. Yet this property owner is limited to the uses only permitted by the small business zone, which is a huge difference than what would be permitted even under the C1 zone. The property owner currently has no plans to do anything different than what's going on right now at this site, but we have to consider that this is a decade cycle. Okay, a lot of changes could take place. You all were talking about the changes that have taken place along Ritchie Highway in the last 10 years. What changes will take place within this period of time? What will happen with this in regards to this particular property? And if you look at the amount of frontage that this property has, they actually have enough real estate to do a right in, right out. How many properties in this particular segment of Route 2 have the ability to do something like that? So this is really a situation where this property is in fact a commercial property without a commercial designation, without a true commercial designation. And I would like to encourage you to at least take a look at making this property C1. Thank you. Yes.
Would somebody like to answer the C1?
Yeah, the C4 is obviously your most intense commercial, and essentially this kind of is less intense as you go. So a small business is the least intense commercial uses of the commercial uses. Correct, and there are some design guidelines and other regulations for a small business.
I think other differences between C1 and small business are the amount of floor area that's permitted and the amount of lot coverage. I also think you may have a broader range of uses in your C1 because small business is really a transitional zone, gapping between residential and commercial. So there, we could get more information on this one, but there is gonna be more permitted, more coverage and more floor area in C1.
I'm mulling it over. I just wanted information that, before it was Coldwell Banker, it was still a business. It sold playgrounds, or playground sets, if I remember correctly. So it's historically been commercial.
But SB,
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just throwing that information out there.
There's not a huge difference between C1 and SB.
yeah.
There's a difference. There's definitely a difference,
Right.
especially when you look at the coverage and the floor area.
But it's in blue.
Yeah. There's gonna be a wider variety of uses in C1 than in SB.
I just want to throw out there, I feel like when I was reading through this one, and keep in mind, I'm not familiar with tax codes, so that's why I want to throw this out there. I feel like the biggest thing that was sticking out to me was a matter of how the property was being taxed and wanting it to align with that. Did anyone else pick that up when they read through this one?
I picked it up when there was
Yes.
presentation.
Because I read that and I felt like that was the biggest thing. So like I said, for myself, it was a matter of, okay, if that's what they're being taxed at, then it made sense to me to align it with commercial, so that way everything was consistent. But like I said, not understanding how that comes into play with small business, if that makes a difference or not.
SB, you could tax.
Yes.
Do you want to say anything to that?
Just has the resident that owns the property challenge their tax
That's what I was
assessment
wondering. Yeah.
to the lower grade than asking for the upgrade.
Mhm.
The property owner is actually a new property owner, that they've not had long enough to be in a tax cycle where they've had an opportunity to appeal that. But as we know, that less than 1% of tax appeals actually are successful.
But is it,
Previous property owner tries,
I
was denied.
I have no information.
wait, so on the assessment from the appraiser, it's gonna be based upon the fact that, and is it leased now?
It's not.
Right, it's leased, so using the income approach on the valuation of that piece of property, it is. And if it is challenged, it's gonna be challenged in that, will be, based upon your fair market, you're gonna have your appraiser come in, and the fact of the matter is that, applying an income approach, this thing is a commercial piece of property, so I don't know if that's a valid argument that you've got an issue with the assessed value of the property. But it's, I think, not knowing the complete ramifications of the difference between an SB and a C1 and permitted uses, there is now a commercial zoning.
SB is a commercial.
Right, and I'm looking at C1 and there's plenty of permitted uses under C1.
Respectfully, also, look at the size of this property and look at how small the footprint of the actual commercial application is. There's an awful lot of this property that in the future could be utilized in a commercial nature. So, and keep in mind also that for tax purposes, the entire property is taxed at a commercial rate, not just the footprint of the property where the structure exists. So there is a matter of inequity that needs to be considered, and we use this property owner, his name of this property or future property owners as well. And keep in mind also that in addition to this being a very large parcel, there are almost no environmental constraints on this property. So this entire property could potentially be utilized as a commercial manner in the future.
Any more questions or responses? Mayor?
Thank you.
And just to confirm, the properties on either side of it are residential, correct?
So,
Yeah, here, I got it pulled up with the picture. Yeah.
so we got our plan
Yeah.
land use map up right now. So just a refresher on our color codes. This orangey, my mouse is moving kind of slow, but this orangey color to the side where my mouse is hovering currently is low, medium density residential. That's most consistent within R5 zoning. The opaque white, over here where my cursor is now, that's a low density residential. That's most consistent with a R1 or R2 zoning. The red is a commercial. One note, something that, was in the consistency that we'll get into once we wrap up the zoning applications, is that these two were recommended to go to commercial plan land use and C3 zoning. This orangey color, or sorry, greenish color is the conservation. The blue is the B&A trail, that's a public use. And then where we are right here, the purple, and what's purple underneath the one that's highlighting which one we're talking about. That's small business. And these two in between are recommended to be small business plan land use and small business zoning.
Well, it looks like one of them's got a commercial use ongoing right now.
So just for clarity's sake, the map is, as far as my memory serves, accurate for most of it. Just that these four currently, as of like the preliminary draft and like tonight, we're recommending small business plan land use and small business zoning. And then just that these two are recommended for commercial land use and that's a change. That was something that was added to the Survey Monkey. And also I got a slide for it if you want to talk about it later.
So my only concern is when we start talking about future preservation and things like that, is like we're saying, right now, everything around it is small business. And as you see, what we do this whole process of learning is that it kind of becomes this ripple effect of once one becomes commercial, then the next one wants to become, and then I just worry about that increase over time, where then the next round is gonna be, well, let's make it C2, and then next to it C1. So that's my only thing I wanna add. Is when we're thinking about future, do we foresee that all becoming eventually commercial?
Yeah, the fact that it's in a row,
Mhm.
small business. I share Shayla's concern and that, augments it.
Can we tell where the nearest C1, C2 or such is?
Yep, so
to
the
this property?
Right there.
the red is commercial. I can pull up the zoning layer if you want to know specifically. Just keep in mind the map's not going to reflect it because it's a new recommendation. These two where my cursor are recommended by OPZ for C3. But let me turn on the zoning for you so you can see that.
That red area is the current commercial zones.
Yep, that's correct. Other than that purpley shade, that's the small business and the two in
And
between.
what's the green?
Conservation.
So it's
Also had the point earlier of, how many people are wanting to live on the island.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of our debate is what do we, and is Ritchie Highway gonna become Liberty Road or Reisterstown Road?
You can have higher density residential, where
Right.
it's not single family homes, you have a different type of house.
the more the residential you have, or the more commercial you have, the less people are gonna live next door. So it's really complicated. So balance.
Quick consistency question. The other owner request for SB that was in Arnold, OPZ recommended against that. I don't understand how these two properties are different.
The one in Arnold that you're thinking about.
Not the nursery, but the one across the street.
That was part of the same application.
And I think you guys should maybe take a look at that for consistency
There's
sake.
the SB right now.
Right, but there's another property to the north. Yes, you're recommending SB.
I think they were recommending R1 or.
Is that R1? There's another purple property.
Was it part of this presentation today? You want me to switch?
Yeah.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I just a thought. Yeah, don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Clarify, we were 66% or more on this.
Yeah.
Correct.
Which was SB.
That's correct.
Of course, this is just the recommendation. It moves on. Of course, the county council and everybody gets to re-argue it.
Correct.
In public forum, particular support or not support of a particular council person at the time. Just making sure I understand.
To add on to that point too, Bo. So any member of the public and any member of the SAC, the next big step of this process is going to the Planning Advisory Board, where the public and anybody here and anybody that's not here can go to that and provide their testimony, provide their opinion, provide their comment, and try to sway opinions one way. And they can do the exact same thing again to county council. So this is far from complete.
Where do you want to go?
I think our vote should stay.
I can hear you.
I think our vote stands.
We still need a recommendation for all the others.
No comment. Yeah, we already have.
Oh, yeah. Go back to that list.
All right,
That
so
was funny.
Still need a motion to approve all the.
all the others, so we've got one for 1737. All the ones highlighted in green need some kind of motion.
I'll make a motion to approve those highlighted in green that were at least 2/3 previously approved in the survey monkey. Right.
Is there a second? Second. Okay, all in favor of the motion that we have in front of us? Say aye or say.
Aye.
Want to post? Okay, so Lori put in for the notes, Lori is opposed.
Any abstentions?
Not to call you out.
Not seeing any. I'm gonna move us forward.
So the next set, while Jesse pulls up the slide, this is where the consistency changes were represented in the there's the sheet we put on the drive for you. We broke it down as simple as we could for you guys. We broke it down by communities. So as you can see here, the Arnold, Broadneck, Pasadena, and Severna Park areas for consistency changes had the 2/3 consensus. Obviously, and I broke it down on the slide to show how many people said yes and how many people said no or abstain. And I have comments. I can read the comments if you guys would like. If anybody left a comment, when you look at the staff recommendation for property owner comment, this was the one. This was one that did not get the consensus, and I think mostly attributed to the 1462 property. So that's probably one the SAC would probably like to discuss, and we have that pulled up ready to go. And then there are some updates as well as that were also on this sheet that have the group consensus. So the whole list, the whole chart that you guys had 44 lines. And yeah, so you got everything that's green when we broke so each question on the Survey Monkey is represented by each big bullet point here. So the bullet point talking about Arnold and Broadneck had consensus. The bullet point talking about Pasadena had group consensus. Severna Park had group consensus. And same thing for the staff recommendation updates had group consensus. The only one that did not have group consensus is the one highlighted in red, property owner comment.
Motion on the table is that we vote.
This is it.
Oh, that's it.
So if there was anything in that chart that you're like, I'm dying to talk about it, this is what I would say. Pull it out of that consensus.
I second.
And just for clarification again, all 44 pieces on this chart is broken down into these 5 groups, just for full transparency.
Were we the only group with this many changes?
Yeah, absolutely.
We saw the most requests, and obviously they continued after the was done in June, right? Or July, whatever that last. 26. I was double checking because I was a little frustrated in reading through them. We had this many more to go in such a short time frame, with only one being opportunity to discuss 40 or more things. I felt compelled then a little more to push the yes button than to argue different things because there was no time to argue. And I'd rather leave it up to the public at the very end to argue against it in public forum at the county council, let them take the heat for it. That's what they're elected to do. So whether it's county executive or the council person.
Can people still file now after today?
So they would have to make the argument to the planning advisory board and the planning.
The planning advisory board next.
Correct.
Nobody else can try to use SAC.
Not after today. I mean, you just looked at like 10 or 11 new applications that came in. I mean, staff has made the decision that if applications come in for zoning throughout the process, we will take them. And then, of course, there's the question of how many will come in during the county council portion of the process. But for us, if we take it in, the sooner we can get it and take it in, the more analysis we can do. So we are not going to say no to anybody, even though they didn't come in at the original application time.
Also, if I might just add real quick, sorry, these are mainly consistency change errors, so these aren't necessarily like there are a couple of property owner comments. The first 3 bullet points though, those are places where, you know, the planned land use that was adopted in 2030, you know, we're humans, we're not perfect, sometimes we make mistakes. And so like in taking a closer look on the region level, we've been like, you know, the planned land use that was adopted with Plan 2040 maybe wasn't the best choice. And so that's what those are. Those aren't necessarily applications from the public.
Or something got constructed between our analysis for Plan 2040 and now, and the land use change. So there's a constant effort to do the consistency. You don't just do it for Plan 2040 and then assume that your land use is static, because it is not.
So
John, did you?
actually, these are applications.
No, the only applications were what we just reviewed.
It is, it's just been a lot of recommendations.
It is a lot,
In a
yeah.
short period, and I know you got it out sooner, but it's good, but it's just, I thought it was a little unfair to have to vote on it, and not have multiple meetings to drag it out.
I feel you. So then, just for clarity's sake, we've got 2 other bullet points. We got the property owner comments, so that was during that public comment period. You know, we took all those in. We looked at all of them equally, but there were a few where we were like, yeah, it makes sense. We should talk about it a little bit further with you guys. And then there's a couple of staff recommendations. So that's just a breakdown of what these are. This page is not applications.
Does somebody remember if we still have a motion?
So the motion was to approve all the committees.
There wasn't.
John had you had your hand.
Well, what happens when the county council makes this decision? The whole process started
They can
over
have
for
100
10 years, 20 years.
They can have 100 amendments or more. They have.
Right, but once the county council makes its decision, then what's next?
That's it. We redo it.
Small area planning 10 years from now, they can start over. And
Well, there are two ways to zone property: through the comprehensive process, which is what the county council will undertake here in a couple of months. And then there's piecemeal.
Right.
Piecemeal is more challenging in Maryland because you have to that there was a change in the neighborhood, justifies the rezoning, or that there was a mistake. You have to apply that with our zoning division. We do an analysis and send a report off to the administrative hearing officer, and then the actual hearing gets the hearing officer. If you go into section 18.106 of the code, it outlines when zoning can happen. So until there's another comprehensive process, which would be the next time the region plan is done, then they would have to go through piecemeal.
All right, are we ready to vote? Okay. Call for the vote. All those, and you raise your hand. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed or want to abstain? Well, first opposed. Any abstention? Passes. So we've taken care of all the green.
So, just for transparency, I'll read the comments that were left on the Survey Monkey for the question we're about to discuss. So, one comment asked about Orchard Beach. They said, who actually operates the commercial piers? There were 3 comments about the 1462 Shottown Road, which is going to be the bulk of this discussion. I have a feeling. But so totally up to the SAC. And then the other comment left was for 2 tax IDs, just asking, are we transitioning Ritchie Highway into one long strip shopping center with car dealerships? And then there's also one other comment just asking for the address for line 40. I think that was answered, but if that's not.
All right. So after much of me silently whispering to Eric, which slide am I going to? I think we're starting on this one. So this is 335 and 337 Ritchie Highway in Soprano Park. We've got our handy dandy table here. It's the same one you've been seeing all night. We got our address, our acreage, our adopted zoning, our most recent public draft recommended plan land use and recommended zoning. And then we've a little bit different here at the end because you know it's not an owner application. Instead, we've got our updated staff recommended plan land use and our updated staff recommended zoning. So this one you might recall approximately 5 minutes ago when I had the map up on the screen and was like, and don't forget these two in the corner. We might talk about them later. So yeah, we're just south of where 302 Ritchie Highway is that we were talking about in that purple color. So we've got commercial land use in red. So it's directly abutting commercial. It's currently a banquet hall, I believe.
No, it's a Columbus.
And you know, seeing as it's been a commercial use, the most commercial use with that would be C3. And so staff is recommending an update to the plan land use and zoning.
Question.
Yep.
The Knights Columbus Hall is facilities like this fall under the same thing as like churches and schools that firehouse that they don't really have, that they have their own designation in any of these areas.
Residential areas, if they're not in
Fire.
Well, all right, so I'm looking at the table and I don't know if Knights of Columbus clubs, private service, nonprofit charitable organizations, it's probably what KSC is. Yeah, so, and it's a permitted use in C1, 2, and 3.
It's not an application.
There's not an application. This is one of those instances where, you know, we're human or a development's happened or, you know, something else is going on where we decided, you know, the adopted plan land use might not be the best fit at this time, like now that we're reflecting.
I mean, just going from R2 to C2. Not a big step. From that far.
Square footage.
Mhm.
Square footage, the amount, the size of the space.
They got 5.7. They have about 1,000.
So, I can pull it up. Sorry, I'm not listening to the producers, but I can tell you the red directly south of it, that's 1.2. And then across the intersection with 648, which is not on the image, I apologize, but it's just around here. There's some C3.
And
I can pull that up if you want me to switch.
the use, it's a conditional use in R2 for private clubs, service, nonprofit, charitable organizations with 125 or more on-site parking spaces. Conditional use.
That again, some of these.
Sorry. So someone had raised the issue as to whether it's a permitted use in R2. I think it would fit under the country clubs, private clubs, service, nonprofit, charitable organizations with 125 or more on sites, which is a conditional use in all of the residentials above RLD. It's condition, so.
Ooh,
335.
yes, I did. They recommended C3. Yeah, because this is
It's the Columbus Center.
so I've got the zoning map up. So just a real, the adopted zoning map. Yellow is where the cursor is R2 zoning. Once it's adopted, you can see some of the others, like the green is the adopted open space. in my opinion, sometimes the planned land use is a little bit easier, but I know you were worried about the jump to C3, so that's why I've got the planned land use, or sorry, the zoning up for us right now. So
Okay, let me, just to clarify, that the property owner did not request any change. We're just discussing this as what's more appropriate for that particular property. Do we know if there is any commercial use going on at that property at this time? I suspect there might be, but I'm not positive.
Oh, the nice.
yeah.
They're not.
I'm just saying, like, just check the zoning.
Yeah.
And I'm a member there, but technically, I haven't been to any of their events or participated for 3 decades. Okay, but I still pay my dues. However, I have some recollection that maybe they sublet some of that building.
Because are you seeing bucket trucks in there?
Yeah.
That I thought were staged temporarily, but maybe.
So it may be that there should be some kind of commercial zoning if that's really what's going on there. And I'm not, I in no way mean to,
Because I know someone's gonna ask me this question.
yeah.
I know because y'all are smart, y'all are thinkers. So I know one of you is gonna ask, well, why commercial for this one when we talked about SB for the other one? It's directly adjacent to other commercial, quite honestly. And it's closer to like that predominant intersection.
It's also close to some really nice homes.
That's a good point.
But I have noticed they've, like, along with those bucket trucks, they've been clearing some trees over there that I was curious about.
I think that is a different subdivision work that's being done.
So there's some trees.
Yeah, that's some houses that are being built.
So you want me to move us further south on Ritchie Highway? Keep in mind, this is our adopted zoning, so
This is
adopted zoning. If you want, I can switch us over to the adopted plan land use, which I think might be a little bit more helpful, because I can tell you right now, I know that there's several properties in here that have potential like land use changes from Plan 2040, so that this isn't reflecting like our most recent recommended zoning map, you know. So just let me know what you want.
So, similar to discussions that we had before, that we start taking a look, we already recognize that among a number of the village centers, there really was no overall plan. It is what it is because it grew incrementally. And once it did, we really couldn't go back and fix the problems that many of us talked about as we reviewed the village centers. This is potentially another one of those examples. We just keep creeping up the highway here. And we rezone without a vision of why we're doing it. What is it that you want to put into that area? Importantly, what's the infrastructure that you want to have around it so that it's safe for the pedestrians, walkable, it's rideable on bikes, all of those kinds of things that we said are desirable in those areas. So I am against this incremental expansion, and I just haven't heard anything that would convince me right now that this needs to be.
So is there a motion for?
Anybody, Steve, you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I would make a motion that we accept the consistency, that we not accept the consistency change, that we leave it as is for that particular parcel, which is parcel.
All right. Discussion? Okay, let's vote by raising your hand if you for the motion. Steve, just repeat it.
The motion is that we leave it as R2.
All those in favor, raise your hand.
Okay, so for the record, we have Walter, Steve, John, Michael, no, Ann, Amy, and Melissa.
Anybody?
I'll abstain just because I've had
teasing.
connection. No, I'm serious. I mean, it's yeah.
Anybody want to say no to the motion?
Then we have Michael, Bo, and Kevin. Anybody else on no?
And now we have
Amy,
Lori.
Emma, sorry,
Yeah.
Lori, sorry, Emma and, Shayla.
I just feel like I don't have it.
So we had 6-3, right?
So it's not consensus.
All right.
Four.
So.
I don't think it passed.
There's no consensus.
So no consensus means we don't put anything on the record.
If that's what the SEC is happy with, we can move forward. And 6-3 to 4.
Yeah, I think with time, we should just.
Okay.
Okay.
So the next one that was in this group that had a lot of comments was 1462 Shot Town Road.
So right now, we're looking at 1462 Shottown Road. Just a little reminder, we're on planned land use. Green is rural. That would be an RLD or RA zoning. The tannish color is, or the land use color is low, medium density residential, which is an R5 zoning. And so Shottown Road uniquely runs through this one property, but that's why there's 2 blue exits, because the road cuts it in half. So, when we put up, plan 24, we thought about plan maybe. This property had a control Shottown Road. So we recommended RLD zoning for consistency on both sides of Shottown Road. And so the property owner reached out to us and said, hey, you know, I understand the RLD zoning on this western side, but on the east side, it's a lot of R5 over here. So I don't think that that's very consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. And so when we looked at it again as staff, we said, bring up a good point. And so because Shottown Road splits this property in 2, and most of the east of Shottown Road is low, medium density residential and R5 zoning, there is a good argument. It is consistent to have low, medium density residential zoning on this section of the property and to recommend R5 zoning. So you can see that up here in our recommendation, with rural to the west and low, medium density residential.
This flip seems to make sense with the road goes right there.
So knowing this area pretty well, this is on the Broadway Peninsula, behind BMW dealership, Shottown Road down. The community to the right, which is the R5 zoning, is Whispering Woods, which is a R5 zoning throughout the entire area, common plotted, HOA, whole 9 yards. The properties behind it do not belong to that community. And unless they're looking to join that community and form, into the Whispering Woods Association, this would be an independent R5 on a small piece of property on the right side of a unimproved road for the most part. You could call it semi-improved road with limited access, which would not be ideal, along with the fact that it's long been held in not forest preservation in terms of zoning, but it's a wooded property and all those different things.
And wait, and this is Old Mill Bottom Road North is in here, and then what about it's probably transitioning from a pond. All right. It's, yeah, Old Mill Bottom Road and Shottown Road, if you head along to.
Behind the BMW and all, and
Yeah.
you make the turn and go back, and now you're
Yeah.
behind this woods. So it's not the forward properties that are against Route 50.
No, I know, because I had to abstain on one of these.
Yeah, that's not. Weird properties that it's been around so long that the road actually belongs.
So the access road,
Yeah, to the people that own the property.
more or less.
Okay, and they just have an easement to access it and do whatever improvements are needed.
Yeah, because
It's a path you've walked all along.
No, and I think, and this is this? That's not it.
That's Overland Bottom.
Overland Bottom Road's here.
So it's not who's against it. It's not the properties that we already
It's
voted
further back.
clearly earlier. It is further back behind the R5 zoning of a platted HOA community with rules and regulations. This is, would not be joining them, my knowledge, unless the owners encompassing it would have access to that platted community.
Like those are
It would be a
houses
separate- it'd be
that
a
can't see the
separate
roof.
several acres, R5 in the woods behind a flat.
The owner did not.
The owner.
Even better
did.
point.
This was a public.
Yeah, this is
A public comment.
I'm sorry.
This
Which may
one
have-
was, it wasn't like an official application, but the owner did say,
Oh,
hey,
yeah.
would you consider
The
this?
comment.
Yes.
With why. Against change.
It was not official.
Any more comments, folks? Questions, comments? Ready to vote? Does anybody want to make a motion
Yeah, no.
before we vote?
We have enough, we have. three of those.
What is the,
What is it now?
what's,
Yep.
that's, I don't know what the zoning. Oh, so the brand is RLT.
Yep.
So if we were to make a motion to keep it all RLD.
Yeah.
That would be the motion I would put on the table.
Is there a second?
The motion repeated.
Yes,
To make
please.
the entire parcel RLD.
Well, the sheet says there's some OS in here.
Well, yeah, so what's the zoning now? Sorry,
No, no problem. We just-
I was looking to the far
Oh,
right.
you're
not the
good, you're
far
good.
left. The zoning.
All right, this is plan land use on, let me get you to zoning.
It was on your thing.
Yeah, I know there's OS, I just wanted to show you where it was, just. So everyone remembers this shape, I can turn off the blue highlight, right?
Yep.
So, this shade of green is RLD zoning. This shade of green is OS zoning, and this shade of orange is R5.
So is this is one of these consistency changes where you guys are trying to take open space back, which we missed by not looking at this, but, okay, point proven.
That looks like a feature in there too.
Also steep hills.
Yeah, we did.
You want me to turn on the steep slopes?
Yes.
Let me find that layer for us.
And is that player public information? Yeah.
Ooh, I do not know.
That's another one.
I mean, that would be really nice to have that player.
I hear you. Staff gets more layers, so I'm like, yeah, we have it. I don't know if the public has it.
All right, this orangey reddish shade that's popping up, those are our steep slopes. So we can see a whole bunch of them on that RLD side, the side that's not really in question. The side that is in question does have some steep slopes over in this area.
You guys don't live on it.
Graded.
Yeah. The recommendation was remove the OS zoning because you guys are trying to snap it across the whole thing, right? Yeah, okay. Just double check.
I'm just gonna say elegant city.
But, what,
So if they were to develop, like, cause the R5 side, I believe, doesn't, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think it has too much development on it. So if they did wanna do, like, put in something to match that R5 zoning, they would have to go through, like, the office of planning.
Development review process, which would require them to map all of their natural features. They'd have to get an environmental consultant out there to run the lines, and then that's taken into consideration as part of the development. Most of the natural features in this county are protected, but you can apply for a modification to impact them.
I think we'd be doing this guy a favor by keeping it OS.
Yep,
Yeah,
give me 1 second.
I mean, oh, geez.
I know there's a motion on the table.
Yeah. Was there, so this is the recommendation page. I'm just switching between two computers, that's why it takes me a second, but if there were any other feature layers or like things people wanted.
Currently rural.
The last public recommendation, like the last public map we had out, we're recommending rural plan land use for both sides and RLD zoning for both sides. And then we got this public comment in, We thought about it. We're discussing it tonight.
What's the August one? What's the LN?
That's, sorry, that's just because I didn't have enough room in that text box. LMDR stands for low, medium density residential. That's correct. It's consistent with an R5 zoning.
What the final recommendation of this zone.
That's what like that's what staff was currently putting on the table, was split RLD on this side, R5 on this side, just because it is R5 over in this area.
And land used to match.
Yeah.
You're trying to see so long. Keep my original recommendation, my motion, RLD.
So yeah, so what's on the table, and we've got a section is essentially it's what's on this map that we're looking at right now, the RLD on both blue X properties.
The motion is on the table. Not follow that particular recommendation, but
RLD.
go RLD on the whole thing,
Both sides.
just to make sure everybody understands.
Any more discussion, or are we ready to vote? I think we're ready to vote then. Can I see a show of hands?
All in favor of the RLD for both sides, say, raise your hand. Anybody want to count?
Looks like everybody but Emma, right? Sorry not to call you out, but gotta do it for the notes. Gotta do it for the notes. Gotta do it for the notes.
Okay, are there any abstentions? Or no vote? Okay, there's a no vote here, sorry. No
So
vote.
Emma for now.
And any abstentions?
So that adds up. So the motion passes to keep both of these both blue X's RLD. So the only other two comments for this grouping was one comment asked, what was the address of line 40? Line 40 address is 580 Lakeshore Drive, which was the Gausser Club, which we mentioned earlier. And the recommendation for that is to keep it the OS zoning. And the other
And the use matches, because all the information that came in the comments is that the use matches OS. Yeah.
Correct.
Well, they wanted it in, and then they let us know.
Is there any discussion for the 580?
I don't have a slide for that one.
And then, yeah, and then the only other comment we received was just asking about Orchard Beach and who actually owns and operates those marinas. Oh, sorry, Steve.
Yeah, the question I had was, there were several examples of communities there that wanted to have open space. That clearly was open space, but it wasn't designated that way within their communities. Are there others like that that just didn't raise the issue? I mean, did that prompt you to go back and take a look? Because
Yeah, so we looked at, we went line by line through all the consistency changes to see what, if any, were a potential question. And if there was a question, staff deliberated on it and potentially provide a new recommendation, which we shared with you guys through this process.
let me ask it differently. So on these communities, they obviously had and so on their plats, what did it show for that space?
I guess each plat was probably a little different.
Depends on whether or not it was permanently protected, which we would have recommended conservation.
Up in my neighborhood, we probably had recreation areas.
A lot of it's recreation area.
They call
And there's also communities that are not HOA, so the land they have, they could actually sell off. It's not subject to the plat restrictions.
This is a pretty old neighborhood, right? I mean,
Yes.
it wouldn't have a lot of the new structures that we have today.
So for this area specifically, just for clarification, we are discussing these top 4 exits, these areas. This one had an application in that was already discussed by the SAC, and the recommendation by staff and the SAC is for MA2 properties. These properties were a consistency change for MA2, but we've heard a lot of opposition from the property owners to keep it residential. So what this recommendation is to change these four, or these properties here, back to residential. To be consistent with what, correct. So there would be no zone change for those properties.
You got comments from those property owners that they wanted to retain?
The
Correct.
property owners and other community members.
Non-conforming use.
So we talk a lot about split zone property. We don't want split zone property. Honestly, these are still use property. Because there's residential use, but then they have these commercial piers that they're renting splits, right? But those four owners came back and said, yeah, you don't have uses, but we want to be more consistently residential. We don't want everything that MA2 has to offer. And so in this case where you do have two uses on the property, it is okay to decide, yes, residential is appropriate if that's what the character that they want to keep.
There was a bill 2020, similar style marinas, just one creek over that was passed. Limited the amount of uses of it, and the owner and all those use for not performing and all those things. February of 2020.
Is anyone,
Argument about from the neighbor that it should be kept that way.
I
This would
thought
fall in the same
one of
way.
those was, you recommended MA2.
The property owner, the property,
So this one here, this one right here where the cursor is, the one that's furthest south. This owner filed a zoning application and they requested MA2. These four here that are northern, they did not file applications. It was just that when this one came in and we looked at the neighborhood comprehensively, we noticed that they had commercial piers. So we said, maybe you guys want MA2, and they said, no, thank you.
It's five things.
yeah, but that's, because this X covers two.
Oh.
So 1645, 1643, 49, 51, 60.
So,
Now,
yeah, we make a motion, keep R1. We can make a motion for you. R1 is the accepted zoning and recommended.
For the properties listed in the
Those-
table.
Those would not include sub 16.
Is that a motion?
Hold on, can I
just got.
Okay.
can I make a comment before we?
Second.
Yeah.
Okay, second,
Well, were there any other comments on any of the other changes we looked at? Eric, like the rest of the consistency changes, there's more than the ones there's some outstanding ones, right?
So
Do you have more slides?
there are comments on other ones, but the comments may have been
Right.
a part of groups that have had consensus.
So I'm just gonna amend the motion on the table to accept the remaining, any remaining consistency changes that we haven't looked at, because they're all, no one commented.
Correct. There are no, for any,
Yeah. Yeah, that's my,
that's a different.
it is, well, it's keep the motion on the table and amend it to add that we just vote on the remaining ones as well, to keep OPZ's
Other
recommendation.
than these, what's remaining?
I don't.
So
There we go.
so the only reason, okay, so the red highlighted box that we had up at the beginning, right, that showed this was the only grouping that did not have consensus. After we discussed this, we have discussed every comment left on that group. But there are other properties that don't have comments potentially because no one wanted to talk about them, is what it implies. So what Kevin does, and to my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is just making sure we approve this to the R1 recommendation, as well as approve all the others that did not have a comment.
We already approved some of the other ones. It's just the ones in that group.
Yes, correct.
The
There's only, yeah,
property. I don't know if we can do that. I think.
Bill has to accept the amendment.
And then we'll come back to it.
Yeah, amended by that.
I'm not. If you have to say you're okay with it.
Well, no, everybody has to say they're okay with it.
If we didn't do that, how many?
All right, yeah, how many more?
I would try to convince somebody from SAC to do what Kevin just motioned to do if, after this, yes, if this
Let's vote on
motion.
this and then we'll.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
Just one comment on this, so. I get the reason why we don't want to consider it. I guess it doesn't change because the owner doesn't want to do it. Doesn't change the reason we wanted to do this in the first place. I would flip it and say, there are instances where we have decided against an owner that wanted to upzone a property because we thought, hey, this is the character of the neighborhood, but in this case, we've determined what the character should be here, but we're not doing it because the owner wants something different. It's the opposite. It's kind of like they want to downzone it, but we want to upzone it.
There's two uses.
Characteristics.
There's two uses, so it's a little bit different than a lot of the others you've looked at.
I would also say that a lot of the others we've looked at, like the applications, we heard from the property owner and they told us what they wanted and OPZ reviewed it and the SAC reviewed it. And then we heard from the property owner again, but not a lot of those had a lot of like community input. These, the 5 listed in the table, folks did reach out to us from that community or who
have their
go to those
personal-
peers or, what have you. We did receive a fairly significant number of public comments during our review period on these properties in favor of what the owners were requesting. So
So
not that helps.
motion on the table as of right now is to approve the OPZ recommendation of R1 for the properties listed.
Now we
Move
vote.
the amendment back to the original.
Yeah, we're just on the original.
All right, so did we have a second on?
Yeah. Steve second.
So are we ready for a vote? How many people will support the amendment by taking the recommendation for R1 for those 5 lots? Raise your hand. Do you want to take the recommendation for R1?
Yes.
Vote yes. All in favor? Raise your hand. Okay.
We have a count.
We got, everybody's there.
Okay.
Okay, so,
Anybody opposed?
okay, so.
So we have one opposed.
Okay.
And then, and Kevin. The motion passes. So then, what is so no, in this grouping that did not have consensus, there are no comments for any other properties. So what I would recommend is if everyone is comfortable with the remaining properties that have not been discussed in this grouping, is to motion for approval of the remaining properties based on the recommendation presented by staff.
So moved.
Yeah. How many properties are we talking?
So this grouping had 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and we discussed 3 of them.
I'm just want to make sure it doesn't. Accepting this whole thing.
No, we don't care.
That was the very first thing.
Wait, and these are all property owner comments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or this is,
Okay.
go back
We
to
already
that
are
slide.
66% or more. This was the only one. 3 comments
Okay,
out of it.
I'm talking about. That's all right.
All of those were of that recommendation. That's when you voted.
So,
We approved all that in one recommendation.
All the green.
Doesn't matter what it is per property.
How many would that be?
All 50.
Whatever was on the sheet that we shared with you guys,
minus the 6.
that we just discussed.
We've already.
Yeah.
We discussed that. We all agreed it's higher than 6%, so we're no reason to go through each property.
Yeah.
There may be a property in there that somebody doesn't like.
Okay.
You can pull it back out and create a motion. Have a specific one in each category.
And a second.
All right, so we are with.
We need to vote on.
On this to approve the others with no comment.
So to summarize, we are on the red one. There were 6 properties in question in the red highlighted category. We discussed 3 of them. There are 3 others that we have not yet discussed. We've got a motion and a second to just say, roll with it. Sorry, I probably shouldn't say that. I agree with OPZ. Agree with OPZ. Thank you, Christina.
Your last.
Oh, no, you got a couple more votes tonight. And don't get too excited, Kevin. Okay, so there was a motion and a second. Is there?
Emma seconded.
We just need to vote.
What did you say about the?
We just need to vote on
Just need to vote.
The ones we haven't discussed that are part of that same.
Just three. We're effectively voting on the last three.
The last three. To go with OPZ's recommendation.
Right.
Any more discussion? Okay, all in favor, either raise your hand or say yes. Aye.
Aye. That's everybody. All right, yeah.
You get a count?
Unanimous?
And I mean,
All right, anybody want to vote no on that? Anybody want to abstain?
We have,
Unanimous.
so we have two more things that we have to discuss. One is another recommendation that we just found after we sent this to you guys. I'm hoping it's easy to describe. So Jesse, if you want to take it, you can be better.
yeah, of course. So we got our handy table. We are at 51 through 57 McKinsey Road, Savannah Park. This is McKinsey. This blue here is the Savannah Park Library. We're looking at a planned land use map. So the one that it's kind of hard to see, but this one is like a black line or black lines. That's mixed use, planned land use. Orange is medium density residential. That would be an R10 zoning, and red is commercial. So the deal is that we're just south of like the Savannah Park Marketplace area. And so, as you know, as we discussed earlier tonight, it's had a planned land use of mixed use since 2009. So for consistency, we were looking at the zoning of mixed use. But when we're looking at it, this one property here on the south side of McKinsey Road is only 0.31 acres, and it's the only bit of mixed use on this side. And so for consistency, when we looked at it again, we said, you know, it's probably more consistent to maybe be commercial and to maintain the adopted C3 for this one property. That's all that it is.
Because it's very hard to do a mixed-use project on a property that's only 13,000 square feet, and I feel that in the future, that's could be a mistake. So.
Any other questions on this?
What's on the blue again?
That's the Savannah Park Library. Blue is public use land use.
Oh,
in this case.
It's a strip mall already.
Yeah. There's like I think maybe some food places and
And like a table.
something, salon or something.
It was a vape shop.
See how you would allow uses, but it's still a nice lot.
Yep, but
That's
these
the
don't-
existing zoning.
Yes.
The time paradise was.
All right, any more discussion? All in favor? All in favor?
Okay.
Okay, opposed? Any abstentions?
Okay, great. And then finally, this may be the last vote, Kevin. So after all this discussion's over with, after everything we've been through, we as staff and as SAC members need to provide a recommendation on the overall plan. So just to keep in mind, the plan includes all the text, all the revisions that we're making and that we've kind of discussed tonight, and the DPA, development policy area, and land use maps. The other section that's not a plan, but will be another bill, is the zoning. So this is a vote for just that first part, the text, the land use, and the DPA. So if there is a motion, again, SAC doesn't have to provide a recommendation, but we would like to have that discussion for the group to have. Like the,
language.
the development policy area map. And correct.
I think if any, we're gonna have consensus on anything, it has to be on this, and we have to stand by the work that we've done, so.
That's exactly what we mentioned.
So Emma,
I move to recommend the draft plan as Eric described.
okay, any other questions?
Well, so that's the-
I second that.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment, in the sense that, we were, I think, relatively weary in the saddle, when that plan. And we thought pretty much everything was wrapped up. And, I know I personally found, it difficult to find time within the relatively short time frame that we had, was it a week? To be able to review it. Do some of some of the issues that I identified, in the comment that I gave. Significant things that need to be addressed. Eric has talked about some of these on there. So, you know, personally, and without seeing the revision of this plan, I couldn't vote for it right now. So it's not that I don't think that we've done great work, but I just think that that we weren't in the best situation to be able to do a good review. And I just want to point out that I think you only had maybe a dozen comments or so on the actual plan. I mean, all the other comments were pretty much on zoning and consistency changes.
Same for the others, same for the other regions.
Yeah. Public obviously didn't find with the faults that I may have found in this, but I just want to say that before we vote.
So I'm sorry, are you suggesting that we should look at this? We should have a copy of it and a couple of them.
I'm just making, all I've said is my personal feeling about this. Okay?
Yeah.
Because everybody had a choice, you know, on how much you wanted to come. You know, you found this disagreement, and I'm absolutely not judging. It's just that, when we do the vote, this is how I feel about it, why would people anyway.
I mean, I have to admit, I'm not sure exactly what's in it to say, yeah, this is everything I thought it was. I don't know that to be the case right now. But if I had 2 days to look at it, I would be happy to email a vote or text a vote or whatever.
You know what, a lot of people think that we didn't have a lot of time, or maybe didn't give it a lot of time. But we're being asked for recommendations of the plan.
Yep, we have a motion, we can let the vote continue.
I need to vote, all those in favor of recommending this draft plan, say aye or raise your hand.
I see 10 hands.
Opposed?
Three opposed.
Can I make a comment? We have the draft. Yeah, we have, did we finish vote? Do we have abstention?
Any abstentions?
Did we go full count? Eric?
I missed one, I think. There's 4, 2, 4, 6. No, there's 13 people here, right? Okay. Well, so if I do have the full count.
Okay, can you put it in the chat?
Or I can unmute her.
It's a comment. I can go ahead and say. Something, we've already voted on getting put it on the zoning changes, plan, but to me, that's the meat of the report. I mean, the rest of it, narrative. I had a lot of issues. I got to page 3 of my issues and I stopped. I stopped reading the report. So I voted for it, but to me, what's binding are those 3 factors. Zoning, the land use, and the strategies.
You say the zoning, you mean the land use?
Land
You
use.
said zoning is not.
Zoning is separate. Zoning will be a separate bill.
Okay. The ones we went through, items and.
We just approved that motion by 10 to 3, right?
11 to 3 with Lauren's vote.
11.
With this,
Yeah.
I don't wanna go back.
So I bet there are a
Gives
lot of
another
us who
opportunity.
would have issues
Well-
with other people's writing.
Solid.
You know, that's really not. Talking about any instinct, I hadn't really. I'm going.
Go see the final.
So we have just a couple more slides. Another thing that was going to be discussed tonight are lessons learned from staff's point of view and how are we going to be able to adapt to the next set of region plans? Because one thing we try to do, we always try to keep learning, right? We always want to make sure it's more efficient, a little better. And we've heard a lot of things tonight. Some things that wasn't necessarily brought up tonight that we're going to plan on doing is currently regions 1, 3, and 9 are underway. And what we've done already is we've actually held more public outreach at the beginning, even prior to the SAC applications going live, just to gain interest, just to gather that input. And we want to see what the community thinks are the issues before anything gets too far down the line. So that's been what we've been doing a lot already. There are going to be fewer SAC meetings, but the SAC meetings will last a little bit longer. We're doing our best to make sure we don't take anything away from the experience, but also make sure it's more efficient because we understand there are a lot of questions and frustrations with different meetings. So we've kind of learned from that a little bit. One example of that is the education material and educational meetings. We want to make sure those are kind of more catered to issues that we're seeing at hand, to each region, to each specific community. And along those lines, when we talk about recommendations, we're not going to wait for one meeting necessarily to talk about all the recommendations. We'll talk about the housing recommendations at the housing meeting, transportation recommendations at the transportation meeting. That way everyone can understand where they're coming from, who came up with what, that kind of aspect. Zoning applications are going to go live much sooner. They're actually going live next week for regions 1, 3, and 9. So that review process will be done a little differently, but the SAC is still going to be able to have the same input, the same conversations, all that kind of stuff. Additionally, we're always trying to make sure we use the most accurate data. I know we talked about that earlier with the issues with region specific stuff, but we're always on the hunt and making sure we get the most accurate and relevant data. And we always want to make sure that SAC members are comfortable and able to be willing to participate. You guys were selected for a reason. You guys were appointed for a reason. We want to make sure you're here and you're really part of this conversation. And we want to make sure we had different opportunities for interaction and conversation where everybody feels comfortable doing so. So those are some of the big takeaways that we've heard from you guys, we've heard from staff, and we've kind of adapted to move forward with. And I'm sure this will change. I'm sure we'll adapt 3-4 months in from now and learn what's working best because each group is different. But those are just some of the overall pieces that we've picked up from you guys, and we want to let you guys know. And thank you for that. So,
Any more comments from the SAC?
Just that it's been an absolute pleasure to work with all of you, and I greatly appreciate the individual expertise that each of you has and the individual way that you express yourselves. I loved experiencing it, and that includes all of the staff. And I look forward to being in a future change making space with all of you.
Well said.
correct. And thank you. Unless there's more comments, I'll segue right into this.
Very accommodating, incredible work when you do sign in on calls and jumping out, including others that have answering questions in between. So thank you all for the process. There's bumps in the road, you guys will improve it, but you guys.
Yeah.
Foresight stay open?
Yes.
I think it's a great. You guys did such a great job.
As long as the internet doesn't get too far advanced and make sure this is outdated, we're gonna make sure. Yeah, that's the plan.
You guys really did a great job.
Piggyback on your hub 4, what about our region 4 emails? How long will they be?
If you don't use, I think Google now, if you have an inactive email address, you have 2 years before it's wiped off the face of the earth.
Okay, so there's no mass deletion that the county.
No.
Okay.
So, this is a future date.
Yeah, so really quick, so this is the last SAC meeting. We heard word of how can we approve these meeting notes? Because they still gotta get approved. So be on the lookout for at least one final email for meeting stuff. We're gonna ask you to review and then just send me or whoever sends it an email just to that one person saying, I approve the notes, or I have this issue or whatever.
So you want to vote?
Yeah, so we need at least 8 people to say we approve the notes. So there's that. Just be on the lookout for that. The PAB, because we've wrapped up tonight, I am pretty confident to say October 24th is going to be the PAB planning date. So I know it's been a crazy whirlwind the past couple months. So I think we're still on pace for October 24th.
That will be at the, as long as everything goes according to plan, that will be at the Harvest Hall, which is the visitor center. It's the multipurpose room in the visitor center of Kinder Farm Park. We're going to be working with them. So I know usually you go to Kinder Farm Park with your family, what have you, and there's an entrance fee. That's not going to be the case. Everybody's going to be allowed to come in to be with us at that meeting. Just like our meetings here, we're going to have hybrid capabilities. So if you're busy, you can feel free to listen or via Zoom. We'll have our lovely little owls. And at the planning advisory board on the 24th they'll be briefed on the plan. And then we'll open the floor for public comment. So be on the lookout for like a public notice or an agenda from the planning advisory board, because that'll have instructions on how to sign up to provide that public comment. And then following public comment or following the meeting, there'll be an opportunity for written comments also. Instructions on that will also be on that like notice from the planning advisory board.
What about the other 2 regions? Are we gonna have 3 talking?
Yep. So no, great question. So the other 2 regions, region 2 is going October 18th. That one is in the Maryland City Volunteer Fire Department. They're really very similar. Everything that I've said that applies to region 4 applies to region 2. Region 7 is going on October 19th in the Annapolis Senior Center. And then because we're working our planning advisory board very hard, we're not trying to be there all night. If we want to hear all the public comments, we're not trying to be there all night. So if it comes time, we're getting tired, we need to adjourn, we're gonna have another meeting just to like wrap up those public comments, make sure we hear from everybody. That's on October 26th in this very room. So.
One statement.
Gus is the chair of our planning advisory board.
Just want to thank all of you for the hard work you've done. You have, the reason they do comprehensive every 10 years, really 30 years, because it's hard stuff. It's not easy to do. And second, that you've done all the nuts and bolts of every piece and parcel. And then staff wraps it up in a real pretty package and gives it to us. And it's a wonderful thing. Hopefully we don't have to dissect it and go piece by piece, because that's not what we want to do. We want to take your recommendations, P&Z recommendations, look at it and make sure that everything looks good with us and agree with it and send it on to council. And they're giving us 1 day, 1 meeting to do each region. So it will be interesting to see if we can get it done in 1 night. I hope we can. And then on the 3rd and the 4th of November, we've got to put everything together so it goes to the council. And the reason there's deadlines, the council has to get it so they can approve it. They'll change it so they can approve it and vote on it so it becomes law. And then in January, then we get into the budget. There's a process why they want to push this stuff along. But I just want to say you've really done all the hard work, and thank you. And then I'm looking forward to getting the great job that you've done to settle on our desk so we can work through it. So
Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Hey, Jess,
Yep.
are you gonna email us so we don't get to review it ahead of time? When you're done the draft, are we gonna get a separate draft?
Oh,
When
so
it's right there?
great question. So when we take it to the planning advisory board, and what we're like briefing them on is the planning advisory board draft of the plan. So we'll have that on the website.
Okay.
Typically the planning advisory board likes to have about 2 weeks to review stuff that comes before them. And because there's a public comment on it, we want to give the public a chance to look at this stuff too. So we're hoping to get that draft of the plan on the website so you can see the edits we've incorporated and all that good stuff.
But we will send the SAC an email because I don't know if all you guys are on the newsletter or not. But if you're not, we'll send you guys an email so you guys will have the links, have all the good stuff, and let you know exactly when it goes live. And that being said, too, even though their meetings are over, the process is not. I would highly encourage you all, if you like what we've done so far and you are passionate about what's happening, is stay involved, provide that testimony, keep this moving forward, and keep the support. And again, because anybody and everybody is able to provide the testimony. So not your job may be done with the meetings, but if you want to continue, you absolutely have that opportunity. And then wrapping that up, hopefully this will be introduced to council in late January, early February, and then adopted shortly thereafter.
Well, I don't know about that.
Every time is relative. Time is relative.
Later. How many, do you know how many amendments were made to planning, 2040 plan?
Yeah, over 120 or so.
So be prepared. Also look at the amendments as they come along. So they're important.
And there will be a new process for zoning introduced by the county council. If they add new applications, those properties are going to need to have a sign posted. And they're debating the details of that legislation right now.
A really great change that I think Trumbauer made that change after we saw a lot of people that came at the very last minute and they got through faster than any other person.
I think we have a couple things left. I just see Elizabeth's hand.
So I wanted to make sure that you're all aware that there is a bill before the county council right now, 6923, regarding that if a county council person gets an application for rezoning, it is going to be posted for 5 business days. Is the new proposal that you will see a sign on that property, and if you're like mine is, it'll be a night sign, but that's all. That it'll be for 5 business days. So if that county council meeting is on a Monday, Sunday, Saturday, Friday, Thursday, Wednesday.
The bill is written calendar.
Calendar
Calendar
days.
days, okay.
5 calendar days, I apologize.
Okay.
5 calendar days. So I encourage you to speak up. You've been in this process, you know what it takes. And so it takes public notice. So I encourage you to speak up and let them know your feelings on that. The consistency, my question is, are the consistency applications going to be available for public review?
They're not applications, Elizabeth.
I'm sorry.
It's really staff review of the zoning to be consistent with land use.
And will they be available for public comment?
I mean,
They've
it's gonna
already
be,
been available in the initial draft.
and it will be part of the map that's posted prior to the planning advisory board.
Okay. And I noticed that there was no vote on the zoning.
It's not ready.
So the zoning has been voted on in chunks throughout this entire process.
Okay. I just saw that on the thing.
And the reason there wasn't a map of the final zoning is because that map of the final zoning isn't finished because of tonight's conversations and everything like that.
Thank
My name's Jack Minahan, I'm chair of the Growth Action Network. This 5-day notice period is a concern of ours as well. This is coming up at Monday's council meeting. There is some resistance to expanding this notice period out to 20 days. We think 20 days is about right. And so if you've got some feelings about this, please come to Monday's council meeting or write council for this testimony to expect people with busy lives to find the sign, notice the sign, read the signs, get to their HOA, get the HOA to take action, and then have a position and do all of that in 5 days. We think is unreasonable. We think 20 days minimum. And so we're advocating heavily on that, we're working with council on that, and, encourage you to take a position on that.
Is the budget process for the driver to come in and check?
No, it's the council's rhythm of meeting and, the concern that the 20 days notice period, that only provides the council four opportunities to hear from things. Four things like that.
I just had a. It's the 5-day action from, what is the time, or is it just completely new?
The charter commission, which this bill is ready to implement, said minimum of 5 days. So, bill takes the charter commission at its word, but it could be 50 days. I mean, it could be anything. It started with 30, I'm convinced that 20 is better, and there's still pressure to get down to 10, and even revert to 5. So, just, just in the interest of citizenship. But right now, it's none. The charter requires 5. There's no bill, there's no bill to implement the charter recommendation.
In other words, it could just, if there is no bill, it could just be done without any.
I don't think the council can take that action without being in violation of the charter.
I got it.
Wow, all the complexity. Well, I just want to thank everybody for it, and this has been a very interesting, useful exercise, and, thank all of you, and I feel like I have some new friends, so.
Hey, Ann, may I please make a couple comments?
Sure.
So I just want to say, thank you very much from staff. And, we've gotten to watch 3 SACs do their thing. And I have to say that this SAC, you all really brought a lot of heart to it. You brought a lot of knowledge of your geographies, oh yeah, that's so-and-so business. And not that that didn't happen in the other SACs, but you have big geography in this region, and you guys really covered it super, super well. And you did it really civilly and politely with each other, which I thought was beautiful. And so thank you very much. And I'm going to give Eric the certificates. Yours is on top because I bet your daughter's trying to drag you out of here.
She needed to turn her app back on.
Okay.
Because it turns off her reach.
Yeah, you guys can take the name. You guys can take your name tags if you'd like. I actually lied. I lied about one thing. There's one more vote. So.
Oh, yes.
Who didn't show up before me?
To close the meeting.
Yeah. You have to discuss it.
Anybody want to say? Anybody?